Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. My name is Łukasz Kondraciuk, and I am the head of election integrity at the European Platform for Democratic Elections, EPDE. And it is my pleasure to welcome you all to our webinar today on electoral improvements and legislative stability ahead of Moldova's 2025 parliamentary elections. This webinar launches our series of monthly webinars addressing various critical aspects of the upcoming elections in Moldova. Please follow our social media channels and newsletters to stay updated on the upcoming sessions. We are grateful to our EPDE member organization from Moldova, Pramolex Association, and in particular, Nikolai Panfil, Director of the Monitoring Democratic Processes Program at Pramolex, for his invaluable partnership and support. Nikolai and the rest of the team at Pramolex are an integral part of this series. And 2025 is a pivotal year for the country. The parliamentary elections will shape Moldova's future course on European integration and test the resilience of its recent electoral reforms. Last fall, during the presidential election and the EU referendum, the Moldovan authorities, also present here, exposed a multi-million-dollar vote buying scheme originating in the very heart of the Kremlin that targeted more than tens of thousands of voters, resulting in new penalties and ongoing criminal investigations. This experience makes today's discussion on safeguarding reforms and ensuring they remain stable all the more important and all the more urgent. Since adopting a new electoral code a couple of years ago, Parliament has already approved multiple amendment packages, recently tightening sanctions for electoral corruption, revising complaint procedures, and piloting an expansion of postal voting. These and other rapid-fire changes help plug loopholes, but also test the capacity of administrators to keep pace. We're joined today by distinguished experts, Pavel Postika, Deputy Head of Moldova's Central Election Commission, Artemi Ketanoi, a member of the Legal Committee on Appointments and Immunities, a member of the Moldovan Parliament from PAS, Steve Nix, my former boss of many years, Senior Director for Eurasia and Europe from the International Republican Institute, Mihaela Lukangelic, a Senior Analyst from Pramolex, and Alexander Schlick, UNDP International Expert on Political Finance and a great friend of EPDE's. To ensure we have enough time for audience questions for Q&A, I kindly ask speakers to keep contributions concise, within 6-7 minutes maximum. Please remember we have simultaneous interpretation between English and Romanian, and we also thank our interpreters for joining. Let's begin. Mr. Postika, the floor is yours to present the perspective of the Central Election Commission. And I think we, as election observer community, are particularly curious whether you don't feel overburdened by the frequent changes in the Electoral Code. Mr. Postika, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for the invitation to take part of this public discussion, and taking into account the fact that we have a short deadline to reveal the main challenges the Central Commission is facing. We have to be honest and recognize the fact that some drafts that exist in the Republic of Moldova for the change of the elections code and legislation makes our work harder to adjust legal documents that could be used for the upcoming parliamentary elections. The legal certainty that we should have is a fundamental element of the process. Although this makes our life more complicated, it doesn't mean it contravenes the legal provisions. Everything that the parliament has on its table as a draft doesn't affect those three fundamental elements
sistemului electoral,
of the election systems, the election bodies, districts, etc. There are changes, sometimes sensitive, but mostly technical,
până la începerea
and they admitted up to the start of the election campaign.
Eu aș atrage atenție
I'd like to
mai
bring your
departe
attention to
principalele
the
aspecte
main aspects,
sensibile discutate
which is
în
quite sensitive,
societate,
discussed
în
in the
31 per deja fost
society, or
votat
the
în
draft 31 that was
și
voted in
care
final
sunt sigur
reading,
că a stârnit și va
and
stârni pe
which
multe
I'm certain
chestiuni
will generate
discutabile.
more
Aici
and more
mă refer
discussions.
în primul rând
Here I
la
refer first of all to
modificarea legii cu privire la
the update
partidele
of the law
politice
on the political
și
parties
instituirea obligației partidelor
and
politice
the
de a
introduction of the
înregistra la
obligation
agenții
to the
servicii
political parties
publice
to register with
membrilor
the Public
organelor de
Services
conducere.
Agency of the
La prima
management
vedere,
bodies.
însăși faptul că
At the first
cineva trebuie să
glance,
înregistreze
the
membrii
fact that someone
partidelor
has to
politice la
register the
autoritatea
members of the
publică pare să
political
fie
parties to the
undeva
public authorities
discutabilă, dar trebuie să ne amintim
seems to
faptul că din
be
anul trecut
questionable, but we have to remind the fact
toți
that from the last year,
conducătorii și membrii
all
organelor de
the
conducere ale
members
partidelor
of the
politice
management of
au avut
political parties
obligația, ca și
had the
orice funcționar
obligation,
public din
as any
Republica
public
Moldova,
servant
să
in the
depună
Republic of
declarații de
Moldova
avere și interese.
to submit
Și
the
la sfârșitul anului trecut,
income
65
declaration
de
on
partide politice
the
existente în Republica
property and
Moldova
interests.
s-au conformat
And
acestei
last year,
obligații 9 partide politice.
9 parties conformed to this
Este
requirement.
evident în această
It
situație
is
că
obvious in
Parlamentul
this
Republicii
situation that the
Moldova
Parliament of the
era
Republic
nu
of
doar
Moldova
împuternicit,
was not
dar
only
era și obligat
enabled,
să
but
adopte
also
măsuri
obliged
încurajoase prin care să
to adopt
oblige
some
partidele
measures to
politice să se conformeze
force the
acestei
political
norme
parties
legale.
to comply with this
Respectiv,
legal
ei au
provision.
ridicat treapta și au obligat
So
partidele
they
politice
obliged
să
the political
înregistreze
parties
doar
to
membrii organelor de
register
conducere
only the
la
members of the
agenții
management
servicii
body
publice, așa încât să fie
with
clar
the
care
public
sunt
service
acele persoane care
agencies,
trebuie să
so
depună
that it would be
declarații de
clear
avere
who
și
are
interese
those
în
individuals
conducerea
who should meet
partidelor
the
politice.
income and interest declaration.
În cazul în care ei nu
In the
vor
case
opera
when
aceste modificări pe
they
următoarele perioade electorale,
want to introduce these
partidele
changes
politice respective
before
nu
the
vor
elections,
putea
the
participa,
respective
nu vor putea
political
participa
parties
la
won't be
alegeri.
able to
Asta este consecința
participate to the
juridică de
elections.
nerespectare a
This is the
prevederilor
legal
legale.
consequence of
Cât este de
non-compliance with the legal
oportună, când
provisions.
este de oportună, evident noi putem să discutăm. Eu încerc să explic care
I'm
au fost
trying to explain
cauzele de ce s-a
were the
ajuns
reasons and
la
why
această situație, pentru că
we reached such a
indisciplina
situation,
financiară este o chestiune
because
foarte
the
sensibilă pentru Republica
financial
Moldova, în special din
non-discipline is a
perspectiva
sensitive
indisciplinii în
issue
finanțare
for the Republic of Moldova, specifically in
politică.
relation to the political financing.
Al doilea aspect la care aș fi vrut să
The second issue
atrag
I'd like to
atenția
bring your
ține de
attention to
proiectul de lege
relates to the
152
draft law
și
152
151
and
care se află
151,
încă pe masa Parlamentului.
which are in the Parliament of the Republic of
Proiectul de lege
Moldova.
151 se referă la
151 refers to
implementarea în
the
continuare, dar parțială, a votului
partial
prin posta
implementation
fizică.
of the remote
Aici
voting.
s-a încercat să se țină cu
Here was
maxim
tried to take
posibil
into
de acele
account
recomandări ale
at
Comisiei de la
maximum
Veneția,
the
care
recommendations of
menționează
the
că
Venice
implementarea
Commission,
parțială a
which
votului
has
prin
mentioned that the
corespondență
partial
trebuie să fie
implementation of the remote
într-un
voting
număr limitat de țări,
must
care
be in a
nici
limited number
ea
of
nu poate
countries,
fi determinantă
which
în
cannot
stabilirea,
be
hai să zicem, rezultatelor. Din acest punct de
deciding
vedere, propunerile de modificare
upon the
a
final
acestei
results.
liste de țări
In this
vine
regard,
cu
the proposals to modify the
câteva
list of
țări.
countries
Inițial au fost două
comes
țări,
with several countries. Initially, there were
Japonia
two
și
countries, Japan
Australia.
and Australia.
Ulterior, în cadrul avizărilor
Later
și
on,
consultărilor
during
publice, au mai
public
apărut
consultations,
propuneri de
there were
extindere
other proposals
nesemnificativă a
to
listei țărilor
unsignificantly expand the list of the
Coreea de
countries
Sud și
with the South
Noua
Korea
Zeelandă.
and New Zealand.
Deci, cel puțin aceste țări au fost
So at
avizate
least these
pozitiv
countries
de
were
Guvernul Republicii Moldova și
positively
de
confirmed by
Consiliul
the government of the Republic of Moldova and by
Și
the
proiectul
Central
de lege
Election Committee.
152
And the draft law 152
este un
also
proiect care a fost promovat
is
de
a draft
Comisia
that was
Electorală
promoted
Generală.
by the Central
Trebuie să
Election
recunoaștem acest
Committee.
lucru. Și în acest proiect de lege câteva firiri
This
care ar
draft
trebui scoase în evidență.
has some red lines that should be highlighted. That's the extension of the terms or the deadlines for the registration of candidates,
activitatea organelor electorale, etc.
of
Și din
the
acest
activity
motiv
of
am
election
cinstit
bodies,
toate
etc.
termenele, în așa fel încât
So all the
cu
deadlines are
30
being
de zile
expanded
înainte de
so
ziua
that 30
alegerilor
days
să
before the
reușim
election
maxim
day,
posibil
we
cu toate dosarele
could
tuturor
manage
candidaților să fie cel puțin înregistrate
to
și
register
eventual
all the files of
litigii
all the
examinate cel puțin în prima
candidates and
instanță, în
to
cazul în care
review
aceste
any
litigii
litigations in the
vor fi.
first
Asta
instance
este un
if
fir
they
roșu
will
al
take place.
acestui
This is one of the red
proiect de lege.
lines
Al doilea fir roșu al
of
acestui
this
proiect de
draft
lege se
law.
referă
The
la
second one
utilizarea
refers to the
semnăturii
use
electronice simple
of
pe
of the simple
tablete
electronic
în loc de
signature
liste pe suport de
on
hârtie în secțiile
a
de votare peste hotare, unde
pad instead of a
alegatorii
paper,
votează pe liste
electronic pad
suplimentare.
instead of a paper,
Deci în acest fel
where
identificarea
people are
alegătorilor
voting
prin
on
anumite
additional
prin
lists.
scanarea
So the
pașaportului și
identification of
recunoașterea
the
automată în sistema datelor
individual is
și
done
electorul
through
doar
the
prin
passport
semnătura
with the
holografă pe
introduction
suport
of
electronic
the respective
confirmă
data,
primirea buletinului de vot și în
and the
acest fel
individual
sublinează
signs on
semnătura
the
alegătorului.
iPad on the
Este o
receipt of
chestiune
the
tehnică, a
ballot
fost
and of
testată
the voting.
deja de
It's a technical
noi, de Comisia
thing. It
Electorală
was tested
Centrală, în 11 secții de
by
votare
our
pe
commission in
parcursul alegerilor precedente, în
11
secțiile de votare din România și într-o
11
secție de votare pentru
locations
alegătorii din
in
Republica
Romania
Transnistria
and
și s-a
in
dovedit
one
a fi un
place in
succes. La
Transnistria.
fel,
That
am
was a
testat acest
success.
sistem în cadrul
We've
alegerilor
tested this
locale
system
noi
also
din
in the
18
local
mai în câteva
elections
localități și la fel
on the
din
18th
nou
of May in several
este
localities, and
este binevenit. Cam astea ar
it
fi
worked well.
principalele modificări la care
These
aș
would
fi
be the
inițiat
main
atenția.
updates I'd like to
Repet,
bring your attention
am
to.
încercat să scot în evidență
I
inclusiv
tried
subiecte
to
sensibile și
highlight sensitive
eventual
topics,
discutabile, dar asta nu înseamnă că este
but it
absolut
doesn't
tot ce
mean
se
that
conține în aceste proiecte de lege
everything that's in
181, 151 și 152.
these draft laws.
Mulțumesc!
That's not the whole content of these drafts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Postica. This was extremely interesting and insightful. And let's move to Mr. Kitanoy from the Parliament. From your perspective as a lawmaker, could you share the sort of the rationale behind the most recent amendments? And also would be interesting to ask whether you do not have any concerns about the volume, about sort of the intensity significance of these recent changes, and particularly implementability by institutions, so the CEC in particular, as well as other participants of the electoral processes in Moldova. Thank you.
Da, bună ziua, stimați parteneri.
Good afternoon, dear partners, dear participants. Thank you for your constant engagement to build the democratic process in the Republic of Moldova and for the support to promote a fair election systems. At the same time, I'd like to bring some grounding. Article 38 of the Constitution of the Republic of Moldova provides the elections that are carried out at the will of the people. Lately, these elections were affected by the hybrid attacks on behalf of the Russian Federation, represented by Shore Party from buying votes and other interferences into elections. At the same time, by the decision of the Constitutional Court number 25 from November that validated the presidential elections, the court found that was a huge interference into these elections through vote buying, through the involvement of the religious cults, and the court came with some recommendations to the parliament to improve the elections process. So on the platform of the legal committee after the elections from last year's fall, several meetings took place together with the Central Election Committee, General Public Prosecutor's Office, Information and Security Service, Ministry of Interior Affairs that were followed by a draft law 131 that was registered on the 17th of December 2024. This draft was discussed in public consultations. On the 30th of April 2025, this draft was voted in the second reading, but also on that day, we received a note from OSCE ODIHR with some concerns. So my colleague from the Commission, Igor Kyriak, has reviewed these concerns and came with an amendment which on the 22nd of May, last Thursday, was voted. So this draft was voted, that amendment, in the third reading, final reading. This draft law is being verified now, and it's also been translated into Russian and English languages. For the third reading, we had a report of the Commission that after this draft will be finalized, we want to send it to the Venice Commission to receive in June. There will be a sitting, and we hope to have a feedback on it. And by the end of this session, if there will be some concerns from the Venice Commission or recommendations, we hope that by the end of this session, we'll be able to improve this draft law, including was Mr. Deputy Chair of the Election Commission has mentioned, Mr. Postika. There are two more drafts, 151 and 152, that were voted in the first reading, but still work is done on them. 151, tomorrow we have the sitting of the legal committee, and maybe Thursday it will be voted in the second reading. So these are large draft laws that come to improve the election process, because it's our duty for these processes to be transparent and the vote of the citizen to be protected. Also, it's important to mention that the draft 151 and 152 come based on the report submitted by OSCE from the 14th of March, where these drafts included recommendations from the OSCE ODIHR feedback and from the Constitutional Court, and Ms. Postika has mentioned that. It is important for us to understand that we have the obligation to ensure on the 28th of September 2025 some fair elections, so that the vote of the citizen won't be influenced. Yeah, we want to mention that unfortunately we come with updates, and somewhere the civil society criticizes. My opinion is that we're coming with these updates following the train or the process that happened. It's very important to understand and fight this phenomenon and not to admit the corruption of the voters and other stakeholders. This would be in general terms what we'd like to do. If there are any additional questions, I am ready to answer them. Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you so much for your contribution, Mr. Katanoy. That was very insightful, very interesting. Let's move over to Steve Nix. Steve, you are a lawyer and you are an expert in election law. And also, you know Moldova's politics and politicians very, very well. What is your take on the country's responsiveness to the very many challenges that election integrity in Moldova faces? Are the recent amendments to the Electoral Code a step in the right direction? And how do they address a sort of a broader political context in Moldova?
Sure. Thank you, Lukasz, for including me. Thank you all for joining this important event in an election that we view as the most important election, most consequential election of 2025 in Moldova. And when we look at assessing this particular election, one can only look back at what took place in the presidential elections last fall. And as you noted, Lukasz, the massive Russian interference in Moldova's electoral processes, the millions of euros that were spent buying votes, the over 100,000 Moldovan citizens who accepted money from a foreign entity. The Ministry of Interior did a great job of highlighting this, investigating this, pinpointing this. We know exactly who these people are. So fast forward to this election cycle. My belief, our assessment at IRI, is that the Russian assets who engineered this massive attempt to interfere with Moldova's elections are only going to be emboldened because of the consequence of these elections. So we're not sure what form that will take, except that the Russians do know that the diaspora vote was very effective. And we're not sure what strategies and tactics will be used this time. We assess two things. For the domestic vote, we assess that there will be continued attempts to buy votes, which is why the legislation that Mr. Katonoi described and that Chairman Postica described are so essential to safeguarding Moldovan votes. We have to legislatively attempt to prevent this type of vote buying from taking place again domestically. On the international aspect, the diaspora vote, again, we know that the Russians realized this was an effective entity, this diaspora get out the vote program. And again, I want to give all the credit to the Central Election Commission and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Moldova for taking extraordinary steps to allow Moldovans abroad to vote. But again, because of the results of the elections, we assess that Russian entities will try to suppress the international vote. That's why I'm so encouraged to hear Chairman Postica describe the opening of additional voting consulates abroad. Because now that the Russians know how this operates, you had people commenting on the Russian side that the Moldovan elections were stolen by outside actors. So we assess that the Russians will try to suppress the international vote somehow or affect it. It might be that they will attempt to bribe voters in the EU countries to vote a certain way, to flood the zone with cash in the European countries. It might be an attempt to fly people to European capitals to vote. So we're not sure exactly what strategies are going to be involved, but we have to be on guard against these types of activities because they will not stop. I think that they will only be increased and heightened, and we have to be on the alert. As a result, any international observation, our colleagues at Promolex who do a great job of observing the elections, I think first and foremost for both domestic and international observers is to be on the guard, to be against, to be alert to outside attempts to manipulate this election. Again, IRI hopes to play a role. We're doing polling data now. I will leave tomorrow to go to Chisinau. In fact, my hope is, Chairman Postica, that you might have some time that we could meet next week while I'm in Chisinau, but my staff will be in touch with you on that. I've gone over my time limit, but I'll be happy to respond to any questions that anyone in the audience has. Thank you, Lukasz.
You have not, Steve, but thank you very much. This was extremely concise and very interesting. I remember we used to say that that the Kremlin has only one playbook of foreign influence. I think those times are long gone. They innovate, and so must we in response to the challenges that they throw at us. So thank you for highlighting that, Steve. Mihaela, let's go over to you. As Steve mentioned and already introduced Promolex, you are extremely experienced and knowledgeable about election observation as well as electoral improvements. I am curious, what's your take on all the matters that the representative of the Central Election Commission and of the Parliament mentioned. Do you, as an expert, as a representative from the civil society, share the view on the applicability, implementability, and importance of these latest legislative amendments? The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lukasz. Actually, Promolex participated in all public consultations that... do you hear me? Yeah, it's good. Yeah. As I was mentioning, Promolex participated in all public consultations that has been organized for adopting draft law 381 and also when draft laws 151 and 152 has been published for public consultation by Central Election Commission. I mean, before they were registered in Parliament. And we were participating both before the first, after the first reading of the draft law and after the submission of a number of amendments, and after that considerable changes to the initial introduced draft law has been included. We provided also written opinion, but also public declaration. Unfortunately, very few political parties engaged in this consultation, either because they were not invited or because they lacked interest. Combined with the limited time available to understand and adapt subsequent legal frameworks that will need a Central Election Commission for adopt their regulation, this could negatively impact on the implementation of new regulation. We believe that political parties themselves could also become more involved and generate topics for debates, not only during or right before the elections, but also in the process of amending electoral legislation. From that perspective of electoral process stability, as it is provided in the Electoral Code of Republic of Moldova. And I agree here with Mr. Postica that the amendments do not appear to affect the stability of electoral relations. However, from the point of view of revised interpretive declaration on the stability of electoral law by the Venice Commission, some elements might affect this stability. In particular, I want to emphasize one of these amendments that referred also Mr. Postica, the rules which establish that political parties that have not submitted to the Public Service Agency all the information required to be submitted to the Public Service Agency before the start of electoral period and are not entitled to participate in the elections. And here I want to mention that the law that have been voted just last week, I mean this draft law 381, this law was not yet published in the official gazette, and therefore it doesn't enter into force. And nowadays we are just 4 months before election. So we would like to raise questions whether political parties will have enough time to respect these new rules that have been included in the laws. Another question which could affect stability is the new grounds to restrict participation. It would be the new grounds to restrict participation in election for parties. For instance, in case if a political party will not present a party member register, it is established in law on political parties that their activity could be suspended in case if they do not respect this rule. Again, it could appear some practical difficulties whether political parties are prepared to comply with this rule, especially concerning how these registers are maintained and the content of those registers, because until recently, this aspect were not regulated in in this law. Again, another question could appear in case if some amendments will appear to the way of resolution of election disputes. We saw that Central Election Commission submitted an opinion to Parliament in order to change draft law 152, and some amendments include also inadmissibility of complaints, and according to the Venice Commission, these rules guaranteeing effective resolution of election disputes also could be considered as affecting stability of electoral laws. Yeah, I don't know how much time do I have?
You're very good on time. You have at least 2 more minutes.
Okay. Also, I want to pay attention to the fact that in the draft laws 381 has been included new prohibitions on successor parties, and we consider that it is a mechanism to implement Constitutional Court's decision regarding non-constitutionality of political party shore. And we consider that such a mechanism is necessary for our legislation, but we also would raise a question how this could affect the deadlines and whether it will be applied retroactively. This is also could be a topic for discussion. Also, in this law has been included the notion as camouflaged electoral blocks and also political blocks. We consider that these notions should be clearly defined in law, and criteria and definitions should be stated explicitly in legislation. And we salute these amendments. However, we should be aware of potential effects that can rise in the next elections, in case if this notion and these rules will be applied for the parliamentary elections. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is the moderator's dream come true. Not a single panelist went over their allotted time. This is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Mihaela. Before we go to Alex Schlick, since this is very technical, very content heavy, I would like to invite all 65 attendees to start thinking of questions and posting questions in the chat. Please feel free to post your questions, ideally in English, but if you do this, choose to post them in Romanian, I think we will be able to translate them for the speakers as well. So please feel encouraged to start posting questions in the chat. Alex, you are very frequently on the ground in Chisinau, and as a UNDP consultant, you have been very close to the institutions, as well as witnessed the process of adopting these new laws up close. Could you give us your perspective on what that process looked like? What were the main challenges? The things you can obviously talk about in public. What were the most challenging compromises to reach within the parliament and between institutions as well as the civil society, since as we know there were multiple consultation processes. Alex, floor is yours.
Thank you, Łukasz. Colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here and an honor as well. I'm glad to be speaking on behalf of the UNDP Moldova today. Łukasz, just to address the question that you put to me right away, I think the process has been characterized by 2 things. First, is that there have been extensive public consultations that involved a very broad range of government agencies and the civil society as well. I've been lucky to sit in on the consultations of the parliament and also to engage with the parliamentarians who have been very open to the critiques, the suggestions, and we can see that in the records of the parliament that there have been multiple amendments tabled and amendments to amendments as well. So there has been a very lively process in which also the opinions of the international partners have been taken into account, including the comments contained in the ODIHR urgent opinion on the draft law 381. I think the second thing here is also that these legislative amendments are characterized by a rather unprecedented situation when elections are viewed not only from the technical perspective, but also from the perspective of what we have all learned from 2024, the national security perspective on things. So it's visible in the law 381. I will not comment in much detail on the electoral issues that have been raised there. Pavel Postika, others have already gone into detail on that. I will additionally highlight that the law 381 touches upon issues that have to do with the law enforcement and battling the impunity for the electoral corruption. There are elements there that touch upon the procedural issues with consideration of electoral corruption cases. It streamlines the procedure for investigation and adjudication of such cases. And that also highlights that this draft bill 381, now a law, now adopted, is taking a look at the elections, not only from the administration perspective, but from a broader perspective. And that is good news as well. I think I'm glad Mihaela mentioned the issue of successor political parties. This also highlights the readiness of the government to address the recommendations of the Constitutional Court and fully implement the rulings of the Constitutional Court. So it's also a sign that the legislative amendments reflect the whole government approach to battling the electoral corruption as a phenomenon. It's not only these legislative amendments, and that's normal to have legal amendments to election laws before the elections. We all need to learn the lessons and change the laws to have better elections in the future. But in this case, it is also battling the phenomena that are rather difficult to predict. So I think there are a couple of things that are still ahead of us in terms of legal amendments. Obviously, the laws 151 and 152, the need for clarity through the legal framework on issues such as the camouflaged electoral blocks. And we will also have to see how these new rules are implemented. I think Mihaela is right that the parties have little time, but then again, for some of these to implement some of these changes. But then again, some of these rules have been in place for a long time. A number of parties have found it possible to comply in time. So I think we will have to see what the others will be doing. I will end up with highlighting maybe 4 avenues that could be still important to consider to implement these legal changes and to ensure the better elections. First, I think is, and it's also a normal practice, is the amendment to the sub-legal regulations by the Central Election Commission to implement into practice the legal changes that have been adopted through the Parliament. The second thing I think is communications. The public, the political parties need to be aware of these changes, and they need to understand not only the essence of these changes, but also the rationale behind them. So there needs to be an investment in the communication of the details of what has been changed in these laws and of the rationale so that the possible negative reactions to them are countered early on. The third thing is the interinstitutional coordination in addressing the upcoming threats. And we do see elements of combating issues like extremism, like the improper involvement of religious cults in the electoral campaign in Law 381. These things will also necessitate a practical response by the law enforcement, by the election administration. So some extra work is needed to put these legal amendments into practice. And the fourth is that in the current situation of hybrid threats to elections, it is very difficult to predict the risks that will be coming to the elections later this year. But this doesn't mean that the system cannot be prepared on a government-wide level. There needs to be an overall capacity increasement. There needs to be a risk assessment, and all of that is already ongoing. And I want to congratulate the authorities on taking proactive steps to address the issues that have emerged in the last year, and especially for engaging in very constructive and consultative process on when putting these legal amendments together. I think much more needs to be done in implementing these legal amendments, and we all look forward to working and assisting the government authorities in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alex. While the questions are rolling in, I would like to go back to Mr. Postika and ask him the first question specifically about what Mihaela and Alex mentioned about the political party and how these amendments and new laws are communicated with the parties, as well as how the government is helping political parties in making sure that they can still participate in the elections, that these new changes are not a de facto excluding smaller parties from the electoral process. So, Mr. Postika, could you please maybe very briefly talk about that part of the process and how the CEC is intending or is already working with political parties in the run-up to the elections to ensure that the amendments are clearly communicated, well received, and that parties don't view them as mechanisms aimed to exclude them from the political process.
Mulțumesc mult.
Thank you so much.
Se aude. În primul rând,
I hope you can hear me well. First of all, I would like to come up with quite an important specification.
Poate chiar și un fel de
Maybe
replică
this is some sort of
colegilor la
an
Promalex.
answer to the Promalex colleagues.
Propunerea de modificare
The proposal
a fost înregistrată, așa cum a menționat domnul
of amendment
Cătălău,
was
în sfârșitul
proposed to be
decembrie
registered, as Mr. Katana said, at the
2024.
end of December 2024.
Obligația de a
The
prezenta
obligation to
declarațiile
present
fiscale
the
pentru
fiscal
aceste persoane,
declarations
pentru
for these
condukatorii
people, for
și
the
membrii organelor
leaders
de
and the
partidelor
members
politice,
of
a
the
expirat
political
31
parties
martie
expired
2024.
on March 31st in 2024.
Deci noi suntem la un an
Hence,
și deja
there is
de când
more
ei
than
nu
a
își
year
realizează
since
obligația
when
care
they
este
do
stabilită
not
în lege.
fulfill the obligations established by the
Din
law.
acest considerent și a
This
fost
is why
nevoit
the
Parlamentul
Parliament
să
had
ridice
to
rigiditatea normei și să zică că
had
acele
to
partide
bring
politice
this
care nu sunt
rigidity
cuprinse
at the
nu vor participa
normative level, and
la
they
alegeri.
said those
Nu
who
le
do not
limitează
submit
nimeni
this data
activitatea,
will not
nu
be
le
admitted
pot
to
face
the
întâlniri cu
elections. So no one actually limits their activity. They can have their meetings with the citizens, they can have their advertising and promotion campaigns, but they cannot participate in elections.
Cum ne asigurăm noi,
How do
Comisia
we
Electorală
ensure,
Centrală, că
we, the CEC, how do we make sure that
există o comunicare cu
there
partidele
is
politice?
communication with the political parties?
Sincer, noi încercăm
Honestly,
să
we
organizăm,
try to
adică, în
organize,
primul rând,
well,
orice
first
act
of all,
normativ care este
you know,
elaborat
any normative
de către
act that
Comisia
is
Electorală
developed by
Centrală
the Central
este
Electoral
comunicat
Commission,
și partidelor politice.
it is being
Deci, asta
communicated
este
to the
chiar
political
atunci când
parties.
noi
This is the
încercăm să
first
promovăm
thing.
anumite
Even
modificări,
when we
noi
try to promote some
transmitem această
specific
informație la
amendments,
toate
we
partidele
send
politice,
this information
dar
to
noi ne
all the
întâlnim cu
political
exact aceeași
parties.
situație
But
care a
we are
menționat-o
facing
doamna
exactly the
Angelica.
same situation mentioned by Mrs.
Ei
Angele.
nu prea vin.
They don't quite come.
Și aici eu cred că soluția cea mai bună
And
este
probably the
cea
best
pe care am
solution in this case
implementat-o în
would be
parteneriat
the
cu
one that we
colegii de la
implemented
IRI,
in partnership with our
când
colleagues from
un
IRI,
actor neutru
when a neutral
intervine
actor
și
interferes
încearcă să
and
așeze
tries
la o masă de
to
discuție
bring to
partidele
a
politice, autoritățile publice
discussion,
și
to a
noi
round
înainte de
table
fiecare scrutin,
political
atât
parties,
la
and
alegerile
actually
locale generale, cât și la
before
alegerile
each election, be
prezidențiale,
they
am organizat astfel de
local
mese
or
rotund
presidential
cu
elections, every
suportul
time we
colegilor de la IRI
organize these
Moldova,
round
în
tables with
care
the support of our
ei au
IRI
venit,
colleagues
au
from Moldova,
expus
and
punctele lor
colleagues came, they presented their points of view. We tried to provide answers to questions. Definitely, there were people raising their voice, but we were honest. We opened all the parentheses and we provided answers to the questions that arise from the political parties. I think these discussions are more than welcome. We will continue them. I hope we will continue them, even if there are so many limitations that can be seen from the civil society organizations. We will do everything possible to find solutions to come to a round table. The closer we come to the elections, and I am saying this regretfully, the CEC is not perceived as a partner by the political parties, but rather as an opponent. And this is probably the bad news, because we are being perceived mostly as the opponents. Why? Regretfully, a lot of political parties decide to develop the electoral campaigns by bringing cases to the courts where the CEC is being summoned as well. So they are bringing these cases to the courts in order to highlight some things that they would like to say, and especially the things that have been mentioned a little bit erroneously from our point of view in the reports of our colleagues from the OSCE, who didn't provide a quite successful test. This is what we think. And especially the general elections from 2023 were organized and managed in a professional way by the Central Electoral Commission. So this is stated. But there is another sentence in the same report which says that in order to increase the independence and in order to increase the level of trust into the members of the CEC and the fact that they are politically unaffiliated, the components of the CEC has to be totally modified before the next presidential election. So this report was published half a year before the elections and before the presidential elections. And I will repeat, even the OSCE standards and the Venice Commission standards say that the modification of the supreme body and of the CEC in general is not allowed to be done half a year before the elections, but they did that. So probably this was quite a bad editing task. So further on, this situation is used as a mechanism to apply contestations against the CEC members. This is why I am telling you that things are not as easy as they seem. There are various opinions. We try to respect all the opinions, but this does not mean that we are not open to dialogue, and it doesn't mean that we do not try to answer all the questions, especially when they come from the political parties. We receive a lot of information in writing, a lot of requests for explanation, and we provide answers to the parties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Postika. We have two replies from the panelists. Mr. Katanoi was first with a very brief follow-up.
Yes, I would like to add something as well. We know that the power of people is via representations. You know, there are political parties, they delegate MPs to the parliament. So for us as a country, for us as citizens, it's important to understand the financing of these political parties. And this is seen from the reports they have to provide. We as citizens, we have to see where do these political parties have money from. We've seen various campaigns in our country and from abroad who show zero income, but they have enormous actually financing and so on. So actually everyone has to be responsible. We have to see the members of the parties, and second, we have to see the financing sources for these parties. And of course, we all have to learn to provide good reporting, and our task as the parliament is to teach the parties. So if at the moment you want to participate in elections as a political party, you have to provide the report on finances and financing of the political parties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katanoy. So there is a lot of interest in this political parties aspect of part of the equation. Mihaela, we'll go to you next, but also after you, Steve, there is a question to you about political parties specifically. I will read the question now, give the floor to Mihaela, and then give the floor to Steve. So the question to Steve is, how have political parties responded to the recent electoral amendments introduced over the past few years? Have any parties expressed concern that these changes might serve to complicate or restrict participation in elections? So this is a question to Steve, and now let's go to Mihaela for a quick follow-up.
I just want to refer to what previously has been mentioned. Actually, we are not against filing the declarations on assets and income and so on. We focused especially on another aspect, and namely to the public consultations, the way they were organized regarding the draft laws we are discussing now. They were announced just shortly before the organization of the public consultations, and this not necessarily allowed the political parties to efficiently participate in them in order to understand the norms, to respect the norms, and this could lead to the interdiction of participating in elections, taking into account the fact that definitely there were rules that obliged them to provide these declarations on interests and assets, but there was no sanction that would lead to the fact that political parties would not be able to participate in elections. I mostly agree with Alexandru, who says that these amendments and these conditions have to be well assumed and understood by the political parties so that they do not come to the idea of sanctioning, of being sanctioned. This is why we think that the involvement of the political parties into the consultations process would have brought to a better effect. But this again could have been solved by this good communication that Alexandra referred to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mihaela, and over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the question. All right, how have parties responded to laws, and don't the new laws possibly complicate participation? I will say this, again, based on the lessons we learned from 2024, extraordinary times require extraordinary measures, and Moldova requires extraordinary measures, given the massive attempt to influence the outcome of its presidential election. So I applaud the efforts of the Parliament and the CEC to require additional transparency for funding, additional safeguards, additional regulation, because what happened in 2024 cannot be allowed to be repeated in the parliamentary elections. And what's the most effective way to do that? I'll go back to Alexander's comments, and that is the legislation that will allow the authorities in Moldova to investigate, to prosecute, and convict, if the evidence so dictates, people who violate these laws that allow foreign funding to enter into Moldova. So again, I applaud these efforts. We hope that there's increased investigation, prosecution, and conviction. This is the best way to safeguard the vote. And I'll go back to, again, this may complicate participation, but when I compare and weigh complicating political parties participating with safeguarding the sanctity of the vote of Moldovan citizens, the scales, to me, weigh in favor of protecting the most important constitutional right Moldovans have, and that's to cast their vote. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. Alex, a question to you on a slightly different part of the issue. So we have a question from a citizen election observer community about legal arrangements that exist in Moldova to tackle potential foreign interference in online sphere, specifically in online sphere. Are online campaigns, campaign regulations in place sufficiently safeguard from unauthentic behavior during campaigning online, and how efficiently campaign finance rules cover online sphere? If you could give us a crash course in that, Alex. Thank you.
I see a hand from Pavel. I don't want to preempt if he has a comment there.
Okay, I didn't know that. So Mr. Pastica, if you would like to respond to the parties matter.
Well, actually, I have more of a rhetorical question, because the colleagues insist on the fact that this norm has been approved quite late. Well, I will tell you that this norm was proposed for public consultations half a year ago, in December last year. So this is a rhetorical question. Maybe Mr. Nix will try to provide an answer. You have more experience in politics. How many chances would have a political party at national parliamentary elections if they get ready for the elections for 3 or 4 months prior to the elections? What if these legislative amendments would appear 3 or 4 months before the elections? So this is how we have to shift the focus a little bit. Any norm that is being approved should not be looked at as a sanction. First of all, this should be seen as a prevention norm. What can be done, what cannot be done, what is inadmissible, and thus being informed, as Mr. Katanai said, this is the interest of the political parties to fight for power and to win power. So they are the first ones interested to trace any legislative amendment which might stop them from the right of receiving this right of participating in the elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Alex, let's go back to you on any legislation in place that targets specifically influence in the online sphere, including campaign finance rules that cover online activities.
Well, first of all, big thanks to Alexei for the question. As always, he's posing the things that are quite interesting and peculiar. And the case of Romania, where Alexei has been just observing, as he notes, is particularly interesting. In a nutshell, campaign financing is campaign financing. The rules apply to offline and online. That has to do with the reporting, and the reporting framework in Moldova already provides for reporting for the expenses that are related to the production, distribution, dissemination of the online political advertising. So there are reporting lines in the financial reports that the political contestants need to submit, and this data is already being published. A number of political contestants are doing so, and the issue here is that there are other actors involved in the online sphere who are not necessarily the political contestants. They are, so in reality, they're the third parties. Who they are, they might be Moldovan, they might be coming from abroad. Tracing them is an issue of practice. It's a difficulty, yes. But by law, their contributions need to be accounted for as in-kind contributions to the political contestants, because there's nothing fundamentally different between paying for an advertising that benefits somebody online and providing, I don't know, a vehicle or a stage or any kind of goods or services. The problem with the online sphere is tracing who actually benefits from the obscure and particularly difficult to relate political advertising online. So this is where the legislative or possibly sub-legal difficulty lays at the moment. It would be interesting to know whether the Parliament is considering any legal amendments, but I think some of the elements in this regard could be addressed at the sub-legal level as well. And I want to also highlight the Central Election Commission has published a press release and the report of the international idea related to the previous to the 2024 elections and the analysis of the financial aspects of online political advertising. There has been an event last Friday in Chisinau, and I had the privilege to take part in it. So this topic is within the attention of the election management body in Moldova, and I think we still need to see whether this topic has to be addressed in more detail at the legal or sub-legal level. But once again, let me put it this way. There are specific elements in the currently existing legal framework that already call for responsibility and honest reporting on the online political advertising. The issue is with the enforcement. The issue is with applying penalties, and the issue with enforcement and applying penalties is the solid legal logic and identification of who actually is behind these online political advertising. I'll stop here for a moment.
Alex, thank you. Thank you so much for this. This was incredibly detailed and very, very insightful. And I believe this is where we will wrap up. We are a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Postika. Yes, you're. You have your hand raised if you'd like to respond to that, and after that we will wrap up. And you're
just to add to what Mr. Schlick has mentioned, recently, several years ago, days ago, excuse me, the Commission has published an excerpt from a monitoring report of the political election advertising online during the presidential elections and the Republican constitutional referendum. And the figures are worrying. All the candidates registered officially to the elections and all the participants officially registered to the referendum have spent about 80,000 euro for online advertising declared at the Central Electoral Commission. But advertising in the interest of these political stakeholders was over 180,000 euro. That wasn't declared with the Commission. These figures should represent some food for thought. We'll continue this monitoring and we'll see how can we apply eventual sanctions for this indirect transfer or direct of image and hidden financing for certain electoral competitors. But it's a thing for a perspective and for long term. There's no ad hoc solutions for this matter at the moment.
Thank you so much again, Mr. Postika. I don't see any other interventions on that. Let's wrap up. I would like to thank all the panelists, so Mihaela, Mr. Postika, Mr. Ketanoi, Steve, and Alex, for your wonderful, wonderful contributions. We will reconvene in a modified panel and on a different topic next month. So please, as mentioned, monitor our social media and the newsletters that we send out. We are planning the next webinar at the end of June. It will be focused on lessons learned from the 2024 election observation missions on a sort of more technical perspective. So lesson learned for those who did observe. So hopefully we'll see everyone online for that. And again, thank you very much for your interest, for joining today's session. And we will definitely be willing to continue this conversation. Have a wonderful rest of your day, rest of your week, and see you hopefully online in a month.